Greetings, Python students. Today we're going to be talking about input and output uh, and also parameters. So some basic concepts that have to be understood. A lot of what we're going to go over is a little bit repeat from our last discussions. However, we're going to bring it all together and make more sense out of it. So let's go ahead and go over a couple of core principles before we get started. So first off, we're going to talk today about input, and specifically, we're going to talk about inputting parameters. So we'll talk about input, how to collect input, and we're also going to talk about function parameters. Parameters is the word we use. Boy, why is there we go. Got it. So parameters. So effectively, we're going to be learning how to pass parameters into a function. So as you've talked about before, we've had this print command, which we'll be using tonight, or we'll be using in this discussion. The print is a function, and inside the parentheses are parameters. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what parameters are. One of our goals today is to take a parameter input. So take a parameter and input the parameter into a variable. We're also going to learn about a couple of operators as we go. Remember, the basic operators are equal, the plus sign, minus, divide, and multiply. Keep a note that these operators have different impacts based on the data type of the variable. So we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So that's what we're going to talk about. So this will be kind of input. We're also going to be using the input command. Not input command, but the input function. And that's basically input. And this also requires parameters, which we'll talk about. And remember, in Python 2, there was a command called raw input. And you learned in our first lesson that this does not work in Python 3. So this is gone in Python 3. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to, and in order to work today in this discussion, you will need a notepad. In this case, I'm using Sublime. And I've saved a file called input.py. So you'll want to create a file called input.py, and you'll want to open up your command prompt, and you'll want your command prompt to be in the same directory that you saved your input.py file into. Okay? So we're now going to create some programs, and we're going to talk through input parameters as we do so. So first off, let's just do a simple print function. So print. This is how you do the function, and I'm going to put in parentheses, and I'm going to put, let's say, hello Python class, exclamation point. Now this is a function, and I put in a single parameter in quotes, and that parameter will produce a result when that function is ran. So I'm going to save the file. Over here, I will type Python, the command Python, and I will type input.py. And you'll notice that I get the hello Python class result, because this is a print function, and it prints whatever is inside the parentheses. In this case, it printed the string that I put in, hello Python class. So you get the idea. That we've already done that already before. You get that. So now we're going to talk about creating multiple parameters for the print command. So the print command accepts multiple parameters. So let me demonstrate how you do multiple parameters. So we're doing the print command, and this time I'm going to do hello. And now after hello, I'm going to do, and this is going to be outside of the string parentheses, I'm going to do a comma. And here's where I'm going to input my second, I'm going to put my second parameter. Okay? So my second parameter is going to be Python. I'm sorry. I need this to be in quotes because I want the second parameter to be a string literal. So I'm going to do Python class exclamation point, and I've got my close parentheses for the text. I'm going to save my changes there. Now notice what happens now. Let's see what happens there. So I'm going to run my input. There it is. Notice that I print the first statement out, and the second statement out is exactly the same. It's formatted differently. What's happening here is the print command accepts multiple parameters, and the parameters are simply separated by a comma. So that's the lesson, the primary lesson out of this discussion, is that you can, every function you can input parameters into the function, and those parameters are separated by function. They're also in order. So let me make sure you understand that. So if I went print, let's just do a funny one, Python class, comma, hello, you will note, let's see what happens when I do that. So I'm going to save, and we'll do that. Notice that it goes in the exact order. So the parameters are passed in order as well. You can do many parameters. The print command will accept many. So for example, I could do 3. So I could do print, and I'll do hello, comma, Python. Oops, I got to put my string here. Python, and then I'll do another comma this time, and I'll do class exclamation point. Right? So this time I've got 3 parameters. Oh, I don't have a beginning quote here. There you go. Now I do. Let me get rid of this extra one. So print hello, comma, Python, comma, class. So let's save our changes to this one. And now I'm going to run that command again. Now notice that I get the same result, hello, Python class, but in this case, I produce that same thing, but with 3 parameters separated by a comma. I'm going to go ahead and, so there you go. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how do you know all the parameters for a function that is included in Python or in one of the Python libraries. So basically, you can go to the Python documentation, and that's at docs.python.org. So at docs.python.org, I'm looking under Python 3.5.2, and there are a whole bunch of built-in functions you can look for. And so I'm looking at the built-in function print, and here's the built-in print function, and it tells you the instructions for how to deal with the print built-in function. You'll also notice that there are some what we call keyword parameters, and that's what these are. Sep equals, end equals. These are keyword parameters. So it's very important you know how to deal with keyword parameters and how to follow the instructions to use them. So looking up here, you'll see the documentation says that there's a keyword parameter called sep. And it's telling you that the print function will print objects to the text string file separated by sep and followed by end. So sep and end. Sep is a separator, and end is what happens at the end of the print of this statement. So we can actually use sep and end in our commands by doing that properly. So let's talk about how to do that. So I will go print. And I'm going to type, and so we can talk about how to get the separator to work. So, for example, if I wanted to do print, we'll do some parameters here. Hello, and then I'll do comma, Python, comma, class, comma, exclamation point. Now, instead of ending there, what I can do is I can add another comma here, and I can do a keyword parameter, and this one I'm going to call sep. So I can do sep is equal to, and what do I want sep to the separator to be. Maybe I want the separator to be nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put two quotes right next to each other, which says that the separator is going to be nothing, no spaces or anything, right? So let's see what happens. Or the separator is, I'm just putting I'm putting two quotes together as the separator. So let's see what happens when I save that. And let's go over here, and I will run this command again. Notice that this time I get hello Python class exclamation point, and notice that the separator was nothing, so I got no separator between the commas. So in between all the parameters, there was no separator, or the separator was blank, if that makes sense. Now, let's see what happens if I add a space in here. I want to add a space in between here. Let's see what happens there. I'm going to save this now, and I'm going to clear my screen, CLS. I'm going to clear the screen so I can run Python input.py again. And this time, notice that I've added a space in between there, right? Now, you could do all sorts of things in here. I could put maybe a hyphen. So I'll do a hyphen in there. Let's see what happens there. Notice I get a hello hyphen Python hyphen class hyphen exclamation point, right? So you can see the separator is a named keyword that tells us what are you going to separate the parameters with. Now, this is just part of the built-in function of print, and this is how you follow the instructions for a built-in function. Now, I'm going to keep it as just a blank space, and let's talk about how to create the next named function, which is called end. So how do we do the end command? So let's demonstrate that by playing with this line above here. So what happens if I do comma end equals, and let's say I make the end equal to nothing, just like I did before on the separator, right? So I'm going to go save on this, and let's go over and let's run this and see what it does. Now notice, this is interesting. So I have my print hello Python class once, hello Python class second, I have my hello Python class third, and then I have my hello Python class, right? And I basically said I want there to be nothing at the end of the line. So no carriage return, nothing. And so it automatically starts into the next one. Do you see that? So there's no end here. It just goes right into the next line. Now, there are things I can do here. So I'll just demonstrate. What if I wanted the end to be a plus sign? So I will save that, and let's see what you get when we do that. Notice I get hello Python class plus hello Python class. Do you see that? Now, I can also do, I can put in a carriage return. So the carriage return is, which this is the default, by the way, of the print command. But that is the /n, right? That is the carriage return. And so I'm going to click Save, and I'll clear my screen again. Let's see what happens when I run the command. Now notice this time that a carriage return class here returns after this, right? So let's see what happens if I were to do plus carriage return. Let's see what happens there, just for kicks. So I'll do here, and there you go. I get hello Python class plus carriage return hello Python class, right? So this demonstrates how you use the end named parameter with the print command. So this just demonstrates how what I was trying to show you is how you could go to instructions for built-in functions, take a look at the built-in functions, recognize these keyword named parameters, and then go into your code and use them, which is what we've demonstrated here. Okay, that was pretty fun, pretty simple. Now, a couple other things that we want to talk about. So now I want to go over using, and by the way, I'm going to show you how to get rid of this funky, when we did the separator space here and we ran it, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get rid of that space if we wanted to. So we'll talk a little bit about how to manipulate that a little bit more here in a minute. But the next thing I want to talk about is how to take an input parameter from the input command, and then how to take that input parameter, feed it into a variable, and put it back into some code. So we're going to do that now. So we'll keep with input.py. I'm just going to delete all this, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's say I want to have the first off, the input basically whatever you type. Input basically says when you run the command line or when you run this, it's going to request input from the user. Whatever the user inputs will be entered into your system. And so what you have to do before you can run the input command, you have to use a variable. So I would say, for example, first name is going to be equal to whatever is input from the user from the command line. Now, it doesn't make sense to just say input blank. It makes sense to ask the user a question. So I'm going to say input, please enter your first name, right? And these have to be in quote, and you might want to do a semicolon after a colon after that. So please input your first name. And so let's go ahead and save this, and let's just see what happens by doing that. Now, what I'm going to do right here, and I'm going to run in there. It says, please input your first name, Guy. Well, nothing's going to happen, right? All it did was take the name Guy and put it into the first name variable and then quit the program. So we have to do something with that. Well, so let's use the print command to see what goes inside first name. So I'm going to type print, right? And then I'll say, and I'm going to use my new tools of parameters to show you how this works. So I'm going to say print, and then in quotes, hello, and then my second parameter for the print command will now be my variable. Hello, first name, right? Hello, first name, got it? And then I'm going to say comma, and let's add a third parameter, quotes, exclamation point. Got it? So let's follow what's going on here. I'm taking a variable called first name, and I'm making that equal to whatever has come from the input command, and then I'm printing the string hello as my first parameter. I'm printing the variable first name as my second parameter, and I'm printing an exclamation point as my third parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's run the input file and see what happens. Okay, it's asking me, please enter your first name, Guy. And now it says, hello, Guy, exclamation point, right? Now, I don't like that space there, so let's talk about how to deal with that. Another thing that bugs me is I will really want a space after this semicolon, right? There you go. So if I click save here, let's see if that space issue gets there. Now I've got a space to type the word Guy. That looks a little cleaner. And now it says hello, Guy. I still have the space after the Y and the exclamation point. So now let's talk about how to deal with that. Well, one way to deal with that is by using one of our operators. So we're going to use the operator of the plus sign. Now, very important. If I take a number, if I take a number 2 and I plus 2, two numbers would be added, and this would produce 4, and 4 would be the sum, right? And this would be a number. So if this is an integer and this is an integer, then this will be an integer. So in Python, when I have variables with integers in them, and I use the plus sign, they are summed together. If I have text plus text, or I should actually say string plus string, then what am I going to get? I'm going to get a concatenated string. In this case, I would get string. All right, I would get so if I put 2 and plus 2 together, and 2 and 2 were both strings, then I would get not 4, but I would get 22. That may not make sense, but 2 and 2 together, if they were strings, is the string 2 and the string 2 concatenated together. So the operator is different based on what the variables are. Now, you get really screwy results when you mix variable types with your operators. So you got to be very, very careful when dealing with input parameters or dealing with any parameter and variables. This is one of the things that mess people up all the time. So that's why we're covering it so carefully in the first few lectures of our class. So let's talk about now how to use the concatenator operand to fix my exclamation point problem. So let's go up here to that print hello first name. Now, instead of using a second operator, what I could do is use the concatenating. So I'm going to say take the first name variable and concatenate it with, concatenate it with the exclamation point string. So this is not a parameter. Rather, this is concatenating the first name variable with a string called exclamation point. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what happens. Let's type guy, and there we go. Notice it says hello guy exclamation point, because the exclamation point is being concatenated right after the first name. Okay, so that's how I solve that space issue. Now, there's some more interesting things we can do. So I want to show you how we can get really creative with this using concatenator operands and also variables. So I want you to start getting used to experimenting with this because you can do some really interesting things. So let me show you one experiment. So I'm going to take the same idea, and instead of printing the first name and concatenating something in the print statement, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print something different. I'm going to print a thing called the name statement. Now, I haven't defined the variable name statement yet. So up here, I'm going to say name statement is equal to, and now I'm going to build what I want my statement to look like after I say hello. It hopefully makes sense to you. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say guy, comma, the Python student, right? So what I can do is I can say first name. So I'm taking the first name variable, right? And now I'm going to add, and let's say I want to add a comma. So if I get to say first name, comma, so I can put the string, comma, right? So I'm concatenating a comma straight after the word first name. And just to take this to a ridiculous level, I can concatenate by using the and operand here. I can concatenate a space. So I'm going to do, I'm going to put this in my string literal quotes. I'm going to put an actual space bar in there, right? And then I want to concatenate, let's say, in the string Python student, right? And now I want to concatenate another exclamation point, let's say. So I'll do boom, right? So look what happened here. I basically created a new variable called name statement. And I made name statement equal to the first name variable concatenated to a comma, concatenated with a space, concatenated with Python student, concatenated with an exclamation point. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's see if I have any errors or if it works out. So enter my first name, and look at that, hello guy, comma, Python student. So see what happened here. I've taken an input variable, set in an input parameter, and I set that to a variable. And by the way, that variable became a string because I inputted a string, right? Then I took name statement and I made it equal to the string variable first name with some concatenated strings at the end of it. And then I printed the string hello as the first parameter, followed by the name statement as the second parameter. Pretty neat, huh? So just imagine the interesting things you can do just with a little bit of what we've learned so far. Now, Here's where we're going to get a little more interesting, and I'm going to give you a problem that I want you to finish, and that'll be your assignment this week. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say I'm just going to delete this. We'll stick with input.py, and I'm going to say, you know what? I want the user to enter two numbers. So I'm going to say number one. I'm going to say equals input. So I'm going to use my input parameter, and I'm going to say enter the first number, right? So I want the user to enter the first number, and then I want to grab a second number from the user. So I'm going to make number 2 equal to input enter the second number. Okay, so enter the sum. So what I'm doing is I'm asking the user for two numbers, and I'm going to set those two inputs to number 1 and number 2 respectively. Now, if I wanted to sum these numbers, add them together, I could basically say, now I'm going to do this right. I'll do it right in the next line. I'm going to make sum 1. By the way, I can't use sum because that's an actual word that's part of the Python language. So I can't use sum as a variable. So I'm going to put a 1 after it. Sum 1, I'm going to make equal to number 1, and I'm going to add that to number 2. Okay, follow? Pretty simple. Sum 1 is basically number 1 plus number 2. This is basic math. It shouldn't be hard, right? Now I'm going to print, and I will do this. I will say print. In fact, let's do our options. Let's make this interesting. Print the sum of, and I'm putting this in strings, first parameter, comma, and I'm going to do the second parameter. I want to be number 1. So I'm saying the sum of, and my second parameter is the variable that was entered, number 1, comma, and so I'm adding a third parameter called and I'm adding a fourth parameter now called number 2. So the sum of number 1 and number 2, comma, and my next parameter will be, what is it? The sum of number 1 and number 2 is, so I'll do quote, is, comma, and then my last parameter for the print statement will be sum 1. Now, I'm going to save my changes. Now, is this going to work? So some of you more advanced people might notice a problem here. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to run it. We're going to see what happens. And so I'm going to enter my first number 2, enter my second number 2. The sum of 2 and 2 is 22. Wait a minute. Python took me literally. It thought that, and so what happened here? It thought the number 2 was automatically a string input. So it made the 2 a string input, the other 2 a string input, and when I did the sum 2 and 2 together, it concatenated them together, is 22. So how am I going to fix that? Well, it's easy to fix. I'm going to convert this variable number 1 right here. I'm going to convert it to an integer. So I'm going to do integer. So I'll put integer, the integer function will, and this is the param. So basically, input is a function, and it has a parameter. And in this case, the parameter you put in there is the variable that you want to convert, or the input that you want to convert to an integer. So in this case, I'm converting whatever is inside number 1 to be an integer. So sum 1 is going to be the integer of number 1 added to the integer of number 2. So I'm going to now save my changes, and let's see what happens. 2. Yay! The sum of 2 and 2 is now 4. Let's just run this one more time, and let's just add a couple other weird numbers. So I'm going to add 500, 100, and 600. Okay, so we got it. Our addition program now works appropriately and correctly. Now, this is a little bit of a repeat of what you've already done up to this point. The reason I'm repeating this is I want to make sure you've really got this data down and that you're able to produce a working program for this. I'm going to give you a challenge now, and I'll repeat it online in your assignment. But what I want you to do is I've shown you how to take two numbers and input it into a sum. What I would like you to do is I would like you to take those same numbers, and I would like you to create, so you created a sum, so I would like you to also create a quotient. So let me, math turn, I'm going to forget what, I think it's what a difference, a quotient, what are the different words? So I want you to create, so you got a sum one, I want you to create a quotient, and I want you to create a difference, and I want you to create, so I got a sum, I got a quotient, I got a difference, and I think I want a product, right? I think, isn't that the subtraction? I think I got it right. I'm looking at a good Google article to see if I think I did. Boy, I need to go back and learn basic math. I'm like a loser. All right, so I think that's it. So what I would like you to do now is take these inputs, create me a quotient, a difference, and a product, and print me the results and see what happens. See if you can figure that out. Now, you are going to run into some problems. And the problems that you're going to run into have to do with the conversion of variables. And one of them is going to be rather difficult. So I'm going to see if you discover that, and we'll see if you get past that. Now remember, I want you to be able to also put in random numbers. Like, so when we do this, don't make numbers that are easily put together. So maybe do 17 and 5, right? So you might want, so when you subtract 5 from 17 or divide 5 from 17 or multiply 7 by 15, you might get different or interesting results. So I would like you to play around with that. Also play around with what happens when you put in like 17.5 and 6.3, right? What happens? And notice in this case, I had a problem, right? So this is a problem. So how do I solve that problem that I just got up there? So I would like you guys to try to figure that problem out. And this might require a little bit of Googling. It might require a little bit of look up in the documentation. Later on in our lectures, I will teach you what the solution is to this. But see if you can figure that out, and that'll be your first assignment. I will post that will be your assignment for this week. I will post the assignment instructions online. All right, thank you very much. Bye.